Question is, do we think that a cochlear implant might help him more?
I started out here, way beyond the tracks. The story of us and how we never look back. 'Cause this is our time, this is our life. And sometimes all you need is to smile to get by.
So I was able to score up all of the testing that we did.
Okay.
The way that we talk about test scores for standardized testing is in terms of percentile rank. So anything in this dark blue range, which is between the 16th and 84th percentile, is considered average.
Okay.
Anything above 84th, above average, below 16th, below average.
Okay.
So the way that the tests are normed is they're given to thousands and thousands of typically hearing English-speaking children.
Right.
Most of them score in this range, some above, some below. So it gives us a sense of how our kids are comparing to children with typical hearing.
Right.
So we'll start with the language scores. Well, let's start with speech. That one's a little more straightforward. So with the speech scores, he scored right here in the 47th percentile.
Okay.
So smack dab in the middle, which is great. That means his speech is age appropriate for an almost 8-year-old. Again, the only tiny thing I noticed was a little bit of his tongue popping out during the S, but doesn't impact his intelligibility.
Right.
And I think will resolve on its own from my experience. If it was a big, loud, tongue out TH sound, you would probably want to jump on it, but it's just a tiny,
it's real small.
tiny little difference. So no problems there. Speech is very age appropriate. He has all of the consonants that he needs, and his speech is very intelligible. So awesome job with speech. For our language skills, so I was testing, some were receptive and some were expressive. When we combined all the tests together, it gives us a measure of his overall language ability, and he scored right here in the 25th percentile, which is great, in that average range. When I kind of looked at each subtest individually, the ones that he did the best on were the ones that were expressive. So when he had to create a sentence for me, when I gave him the picture, he did a beautiful job on that, scored up here in the 63rd. The ones that were the hardest for him were the ones that required a lot of auditory processing, a lot of listening. So the sentence comprehension, where he had to listen to little details and all the pictures looked very similar. He had to listen for little details in the sentences. As well as when the recalling sentences, where I told him a sentence, he had to repeat it back, kind of like he just had to do. For me, he had to get every single detail in the sentence right as well. For both of those, he scored here in the 16th. Now, yes, technically that's considered average. When I see a skill down here at the 16th, to me that's like an at-risk. That's like a little red flag skill. It's not technically below average, but it's at risk for being delayed. So I think this is just kind of further evidence that his auditory skills, his listening skills are impacting his language. But that overall, even with, the little bit of difficulty that he is having, he still has developed quite a bit of speech and spoken language.
Right.
But I think he's working just like harder than he needs to be.
Yeah, he's completely working overtime.
Yes, exactly. So luckily he's working so hard that he's, developed age appropriate language, but he's showing me that it is taking him a lot of effort. Any questions about these ones so far?
No,
Okay. And then the last one that I did was the auditory testing, where I had him repeat back all those numbers to me.
Right.
And he actually scored right here in the 25th again, so average range, a little bit, more solidly average than this 16th dangling at the end there. So when I gave him numbers and words to repeat, he has age-appropriate ability to repeat and sequence them back to me. When I had him reverse them, though, he actually scored down in the 16th again. So I think, to me, that's what I consider like auditory working memory. So he can remember and give it back to me if it's loud enough and clear enough. But if he has to do something with that auditory information, it's a little bit more challenging for him. And you could see his like little wheels turning really, really hard. And that one was a little more difficult for him. So overall, solid speech skills, language skills are in the average range, but anything that required a lot of listening and repetition was down here in the kind of red flag below, almost below average range. And then you're welcome to share this with his teaching team if you feel it would be beneficial for them. I'll have some, strategies and ideas and things in there too that they can use. And that'll all be included in there. And then if we're going down the cochlear implant route, this report then becomes part of the cochlear implant candidacy packet.
We had talked a little bit last time that he you know, does do better with his cross system. But it's kind of a band-aid. We're not giving him any hearing back to that ear that doesn't hear very well. We're just sending the signal so that the good ear can kind of work double time or have two glimpses at the sound coming from the other side, which helps him. But, you know, the question is, do we think that and are you ready for the commitment and maybe kind of the fight that it would take to get there?
Yeah, I know we spoke about that.
Yeah, because so it is now FDA approved that kids can get, well, actually anybody can get cochlear implants for what we call single-sided deafness, which is what I'll like, or SSD is what we call Aiden's kind of hearing, one normal hearing ear and one ear that's deaf or basically, you know, non-functional.
Yeah.
It doesn't give him words. He can't understand words with it. But the insurance that you have doesn't have it written in its rules that they will approve it. So the state is reviewing it on a case-by-case basis. So I can't make any promises as to whether they approve it. He meets all the criteria with the FDA, but it might be a fight on your end a little bit in appeals. You know, if it comes to that, if you want to go down that route with your insurance.
Okay.
We need to talk a little bit about how a cochlear implant works.
Okay.
Because it is a surgical option.
Right.
So what happens is that during the surgery, or the surgeon will go and make an incision behind the ear, and then kind of just move the ear forward, take away a little bit of the bone, so that they can get access to this inner part of the ear here, this cochlea.
Okay.
A typical hearing ear, you know, in his good hearing ear, sound goes down the ear canal, it hits this eardrum, the fluid inside of this cochlea to vibrate and stimulate a special kind of cell called a hair cell. When those hair cells move, it actually changes sound from being like a vibration to the neural message along the auditory nerve, or the electric message. Because when our nerves fire, it's like little tiny blips of electricity, right? So the surgeon, so in his ear that doesn't hear very well, this cochlea, those hair cells don't work.
Okay.
They're not functioning how they should, which is why even when we turn the volume way up, it doesn't help him.
Right.
So what the surgeon puts in during the surgery is this internal electrode device. So there's this part that kind of just goes right under the scalp, and then after they take a little bit of the bone away, they can like wrap this part in and put this tiny little electrode array inside of the cochlea.
Oh, wow.
And what that does, do you see these tiny little electrodes on there?
Yeah.
So those can actually play little pulses of basically electric current or electricity, so it stimulates the auditory nerve directly. So it's like replacing the part that doesn't work. So that to give him that sensation of hearing back. Now, that does mean he needs to have a hearing nerve.
Right.
So part of the, you know, when you see Dr. Cheng next week is that he'll order a scan to make sure that the anatomy is, you know, works for Dr. Cheng to put the electrode in, but also that he has this nerve.
Right.
He has responded on hearing tests at really high levels, which makes me feel hopeful that he does have a nerve, but sometimes at such high levels, it can be like a physical pulsing sensation, because there's just so much pressure in the ear. So that's why I just we have to get the scan. And that's kind of be the final decision. Okay, so once the surgeon puts that in, then they, you know, put the stitches behind the ear. You honestly can't tell. They usually don't have to shave any hair, which is nice. And then he heals for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then you come back for what we call the activation, where we put on the outside hearing piece for the first time. So there's 2 different styles. They do exactly the same thing. One kind of looks more like a regular hearing aid. So this goes on the ear like this.
That's what Aria has.
Oh, yeah. And then this microphone here picks up the sound. This little computer processes it and sends it along this cable to what we call the coil. The coil has a magnet, and the internal device also has a magnet, so they know where to connect.
Oh, cool.
And communicate and send the sound to the internal device. Isn't that cool? And you can get lots of different colors.
That's pretty cool.
Put stickers on it. Yeah, you can kind of, yes, exactly, that's it. And so there's another style like this. It's kind of all in one. Not my favorite for the young ones because this is a little easier to knock off.
Yeah.
But it's nice, you know, when he gets a little older, you know, this is something he has for life.
Yeah, definitely.
So when he gets a little older, you know, it's nice to know there are options like this if you want. I prefer this style for kids, but you know, I want to show you everything. It's a little different when kids have hearing loss in both ears.
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes they're using their cochlear implants to learn speech and language. Jaden already can rely on his good ear, and he's done that to, you know, be age appropriate in his speech and language. But where he struggles is when there's background noise and maybe telling where a sound is coming from. So I would expect that in time, his cochlear implant would help him in the situation like we did in the sound booth where somebody's talking on the side, the bad side, and there's noise on the good side. I expect that that would be easier for him with a cochlear implant. And I would expect for him to have a better sense of like the sound is coming from the left or the right. And what that means for him as a person is hopefully would just take him less mental effort and be less fatiguing over the day. As well as, you know, some safety things of like, you know,
like everyday life.
Everyday life. But that it comes at, you know, he has to be wearing it 10 hours a day. Every day. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's not going to be worth going through surgery if you're not ready to, you know, have that commitment. It's going to take rehabilitation and therapy. Because it is not like normal hearing. It's not like we're just giving him normal sound quality. It's an electronic device. It only, you know, has this electrode array only has 12 little contacts on it, and it replaces tens of thousands of hair cells that normally would play for sound.
Okay, you guys, so we just got done. As you can see, it's pretty much like we can do it. Like she was saying, we have to still go get the MRI to make sure he does have that one nerve done, but with insurance company wise, it's going to be a huge fight because I don't know if I was recording at that time, but she was saying that they're pretty much choosing it from a case-to-case basis on what child can get this one-sided cochlear. The CI. So it's going to be a fight on my part. If they deny it, I'm gonna have to keep reappealing it until they decide, hey look, this family really wants this, so let's do the surgery. But again, it all goes back to if he has that nerve, and I'm just like, fingers crossed he does, because oh my gosh, this can be like a huge life-changing process for this little boy, and he absolutely deserves this. So my battery's dying. So with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Please give us prayers, keep us prayers and everything at night. And you know, again, thank you guys so much for the support that you guys show us. If you guys know anyone that's going through this process, share this video with them. If they can give you any insight on this,